of anything they have to offer me, right? It's like, get over yourself, Mark. You've got to.
I believe if we could be indivisible, we would be indestructible. And
after this, I don't mean to ask you to put you on the spot to say, tell us what's going to happen in the future, but tell us what's going to happen in the future.
Good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Keep Leading Live. I'm your host, Eddie Turner, the Leadership Accelerator. I work with leaders to accelerate performance and drive impact through the power of executive coaching, masterful facilitation, and professional keynote speeches. We are streaming live today on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. I encourage you to join us on any platform that's easy for you. Share the link, hit that share button and share it with your friends and colleagues so that they can join and be a part of our conversation. Ask any question that you that you desire to ask, because we are going to have a wonderful conversation with an incredible thought leader that I've invited to be on my program with me today. And the thought leader that I've invited to be with me today is Rosemarie Rossetti. Rosemarie Rossetti, let me tell you a little bit about her as I show you her doing one of the things that she does really, really well. She's a professional keynote speaker, but in addition to being a professional keynote speaker, she's an expert in disability inclusion, accessibility, and universal design. Now, she is, Rosemarie Rossetti is a Ph.D. who, in addition to being recognized for her work in these areas, is considered a leading expert in disability universal design, but she also has an inspiring story of resilience. And she gives these motivational presentations that help others understand how they can overcome adversity using her own story. So it's a story about how today we can talk about inclusion and embracing others when it comes to our experiences at work and in our community, but also overcoming challenges. And that's the message that we want to take away from our conversation today. And to do so, let me do so by inviting onto the stage at this time, Rosemarie Rossetti. Rosemarie, welcome.
Well, thank you, Eddie. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I'm so excited to have you. And let me also go a step further and share with people, if I can, here we go, your book that you have on this topic, Universal Design. You actually have a toolkit that you offer for people. So we'll encourage them to visit the website that they see there. And for those who are not tuned in visually, the website is universaldesigntoolkit.com. universaldesigntoolkit.com, and that will be placed in the show notes for people to access later on. Now, Rosemarie, before I ask you to just to share a couple other things about yourself, I want to tell people about when I first met you. I was the speaker who had just closed the National Speakers Association's in Ohio, the chapter. I had given a workshop, and at the end of that workshop, someone was assigned to take me to the airport and was not going to be able to do so. You volunteered to take me. And I was so honored and happy that you took me. I was surprised. I did not know that you drive. And you were so nice and you took me. And as you're driving, I'm just sitting there next to you in awe. And I said, Rosemarie, do you mind if I take a picture of you? And you were so sweet. You said, yes, I could take the picture. And this is the picture of you driving me to the airport. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And so I have talked about you incessantly since that day. I show this in my own presentations about inclusion and diversity and why it matters. And this is when we first met, before we went to the airport. I guess I should have showed that one first. So that's when we first met. So that's my delightful memory of you and why I want others to know about you and the work that you're doing because it really matters. Tell us what I may have missed when I introduced you.
Well, you've given a good introduction in terms of an overview of disability inclusion. And so we look at the house and condos and apartments. I also look at corporations, workplaces. So we're looking at the built environment. It could be a music hall, it could be a restaurant, it could be a hotel. So I work a lot in the built environment for accessibility, not just the ADA compliance, but going way beyond that in terms of universal design, which is looking at a framework for designing for all people, all ages, regardless of disability. So it goes beyond the ADA. So that's one of the pillars of my business, is looking at that built environment for disability inclusion. And Eddie, my second pillar is about accommodating people with disabilities at meetings and events. So I work with the meeting professional to help consult with them throughout the entire planning process, going on site visits with them, helping them with the questions they're asking on their website for the registration. And then I'm working with the travel and tourism industry with destination marketing organizations to improve the accessibility of destinations and to help the destination marketing organization to gather the information to promote their city as an accessible destination. And also my next pillar then is the motivational speaking, looking at embracing change and being resilient. So my business has really morphed since my injury, and it continues. Clients continue to ask me for services that maybe I've never thought of doing, and the business continues to boom.
Happy to hear that your business continues to boom. Certainly, there's a big need for it. And you're doing just phenomenal work, Rosemarie. And that's why I wanted people to know about you because you used an acronym that some of my listeners may not be familiar with at the beginning of your comments there that I want to highlight. And that's ADA, the American with Disabilities Act. Can you share why that is so significant?
Accessibility matters. It's a human right. And that is a civil rights national legislation in 1990. And so we're looking at, is it still appropriate today? What do we need to do because of the aging population? And as we have a lot more older adults and people that are living longer, we need to look at a refresh of the American with Disabilities Act. It was for public buildings, and it made a significant difference here in the United States so that we could have an equal opportunity to visit venues, to go out in public and have an equal opportunity rather than having doors closed and steps in our ways. Now we have ramps, we have elevators, we have pathways of travel throughout restaurants, throughout movie theaters, throughout football stadiums. So it really did initiate a lot of interest in inclusion in this country.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Rosemarie. Because for folks who were born before that time, they might take for granted that this is just the way things always were. But it took legislation to ensure, as you said, equal accessibility, that everyone would be included in being able to enjoy entertainment venues, being able to make it to a place of employment, and be able to work at a place of employment because they'd have these accommodations made for them. And so that's important. And then the work you're doing is taken to a step further, as you mentioned, because when someone now does get inside these venues, do they have the ability to truly enjoy it? So we were able to use the wheelchair to get up the ramp, but inside, have we made appropriate seating places, for example? And I saw one of your posts recently where you talked about, number one, seating for wheelchairs, but then also what happens later on when everyone else gets a break to go to the restrooms. Can you share that?
Well, we would need to have accessible restrooms on the accessible route of travel with doors that automatically open with a push of a button. I shouldn't have to struggle opening a door to get in or struggle opening a door to get out. So we need to see more door stops, or a better design is, why do you need doors on restrooms to get into the restroom? The more modern approach is designing it with inclusion in mind and not having a door. But when doors are there for an older establishment, um, put some electric to it, put them as a power operated door, and make sure there's signage there so that if I'm passing through an interior and I say I need to use a restroom, that I don't have to search where is the accessible restroom. I'm hoping they're all accessible, so put signs on them indicating accessibility. And then once I'm in there, I'll wash my hands. I need to have an accessible sink, accessible faucet, accessible soap, accessible hand dryers or towels. And then, is that stall labeled? The one that I need for me in my wheelchair. It'd be nice if there was a label on it, the universal symbol for accessibility, so that I know that's the one I should go in. And it also alerts the other women, hey, leave that restroom stall for the people who really need it, so that I don't have to wait in line because other people decided they wanted to use that. So please have some courtesy and leave that open for people in walkers and wheelchairs, so that they have that access.
That's a really good point to highlight, Rosemary. That I would not have thought about it when it came to restroom stalls, but that is designated for people who need that accessibility, and not just because it's a more convenient or larger stall. And the same, by extension, would be true with parking spaces. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. We need a lot more parking spaces. We have so many placards now for accessible parking that have been given to people legitimately by their doctors because of their need. But in 1990, there weren't that many of us. And so we need to change the formula that the Americans with Disabilities Act originally created in terms of how many accessible car parking spaces, how many accessible van parking places. We've got to change that. And I'm on a national task force now with the United Spinal Association that's trying to move that needle so that more spaces are available.
Excellent. And then the fact that to your point about people recognizing the need to respect those spaces, those aren't just quick convenient spaces for folks who don't have a placard, an appropriately assigned placard. And certainly when there's an extra space given so that people who have a wheelchair or because of their disability need to open up their door, those little white lines, when I see someone park there, that just drives me bonkers. That's for the accessibility of the wheelchair or the person to get in and out of their vehicle. That's not a parking spot. Oh my word.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. The term is access aisle. And there's a difference between a van accessible parking place and a car accessible. And so my message is, if you have a car, please park in the car accessible ones. Leave the van ones alone so that I have a place when I roll up. If you don't need the van accessible, please let that one sit for the next person.
Excellent. Thank you. So we want to highlight that because these aren't small matters. This is a tremendous disservice. And so you're a highly educated woman. You have a PhD. You are a scholar. And so when people are inclusive, we get a chance to bring in intellectuals like yourself, bring in other people with diverse viewpoints and opinions into our workplace and into our venues to make a better experience for all of us when we pay attention to people outside of those who are abled and focus on those who are not as able in a specific area. They have so much more they can contribute to life and society. Now, you have had some really good success stories come from your work. Can you share just one of the success stories that's come from your work?
Well, there's lots of them. As I work with destination marketing organizations, I'm working with them to create new landing pages. A landing page is part of their website that focuses on accessibility. And so we actually segment that landing page with mobility, with sight, with hearing, also with the notion of neurodiversity, so that
Mhm.
when a family is thinking about going to a city, and they have specific disability and specific needs as they're going to look for a hotel or look for a zoo or look for a park or look for a restaurant, they'll find that at the destination marketing organization. It'll be very easy and very top of mind to be a screening device for them, to let them know that you are welcome here and what the public transportation offers and what restaurants are near the museum that are going to be accessible. So I'm very encouraged by the clients I'm working with that are doing surveys with all of their partners and finding out what they have so that their websites will also showcase the accessibility. So if it's a theater, we want to know exactly what that theater has for accessibility, or a zoo. And a lot of people will then benefit by being able to be confident as they're making their choices of destination for business or for pleasure, or a combination. The new word is bleisure. It's business and pleasure. Many people are going for a business reason, but then extending that trip for pleasure.
I hadn't, I've not heard that phrase. I hadn't thought of that. But that's a really good way of putting it, because that is important, especially post pandemic, I suspect, with there being more of a mix and people traveling and combining the two, that does make sense. I like that. Good. There was a precursor to your work in this space. Can you share with our listeners the story you share with me about you and your beloved husband that led to these circumstances?
Yes, I haven't always been in a wheelchair. It was not from birth. It happened on June 13th of 1998. My husband, Mark, later, and I were celebrating our third wedding anniversary, and we went for a bicycle ride on a nearby bike trail. When we were riding, Mark heard what he thought was a gunshot, but it wasn't a gunshot at all. He looked around and he saw a tree, and it was halfway to the ground. So I heard him yelling at me from behind because he had slowed down. And all I heard him say was, "Look over there, something's falling." And then a really loud stop. He tried to warn me to get off my bike and stop. But what he had seen was a tree, 7,000-pound tree, fell right on top of me. And that was followed by live power lines. So I was instantly paralyzed from the waist down with a spinal cord injury as a result of that tree.
And just a horrific and harrowing event. But in spite of that happening to you, you did not let that hold you back. Tell us about the resilience that you've displayed and how it's taken for you to work your way back from that.
Well, waking up from the surgery alive, that was, I guess, a big transition because I wasn't sure when the anesthesiologist put me to sleep for the surgery, would that be my last thought? So waking up in intensive care was an epiphany. It was a real turning point to say, okay, whatever, I'm alive. What am I going to do with this? So it was a determination that I had so much invested in my life, in my education, in my businesses at the time. I thought, I've got to figure this out. It's going to be very difficult with the body that had been injured and with the lack of mobility. My head was protected by the helmet. Fortunately, I had no brain injury. And so moving on day by day to say, what can I do to take back my life and to resume what it was that I had. I had an active life, and now could I lead an active life with inactive feet? And that was the challenge, to say, coming home from the hospital in a wheelchair, hey, that was a rude awakening. My home was not designed to be accessible for Mark to have to lift me up in a wheelchair to get me in the front door. And then I couldn't even roll on the carpet. I was too weak. And doors had to come off. And it was just frustrating to understand how a house can intensify a disability. And that's what was happening.
A house can intensify a disability. That's an interesting phrase. And you recognize that, and this is why when I was sharing the session description, I was thinking about how sometimes we don't see something, literally see something, until wow, now I see it. Now it's here, it's in front of me. And so you took your experience, where you said so eloquently there that a disability intensifies, a house rather, intensifies a disability, and you turned that into a new passion and a new area of thought leadership. So tell us how you and your dear husband, and I want tell us how you and your husband designed that and led to the work that you're doing that is being displayed in magazines all over the world.
Well, as a result of that frustration, we knew we had to move. And so we started looking around to see if there was an existing house, and there wasn't anything around at that time. We started interviewing builders and looking at their existing ranch style floor plans, and there was nothing there either. So we hired an architect in 2004 to design our new home, knowing that my disability is permanent. I'll be in a wheelchair at this point. So I need to function. I need to have my business there. I need to have comfort, independence, and safety and convenience. So we set out to design our home. And then in 2005, a group of fellow members of the National Speakers Association were in a mastermind and gave us the idea to build it as a national demonstration home and garden, and to get sponsors to help us to use their products and their services to support the efforts of building a national demonstration home. And Eddie, we had never built a home before, and we will never build another home. It was a Herculean effort. As I said, it was in 2004 we started the design, 2005, the idea to make it a public site. 2006, we found the lot. 2009, we broke ground. 32 months later, in May of 2012, we finally moved in. 2 more years to finish the landscape in the basement and open it to the public. It was a 10-year journey, and we've lived here now for 12 years. So it's the Universal Design Living Laboratory. Anyone can take a virtual tour at udll.com. Just go to our website, udll.com. I also will give you a free chapter of the Universal Design Toolkit so that you can download that, which is a list of the universal design features in our home, room by room. So go through and go on the virtual tour. You could play a game there, Eddie. Our cat, Kiko, was the photo bomber while the photographer was doing the virtual tour. So you'll see a little orange tabby cat throughout our home as you're touring the Universal Design Living Laboratory.
Well, excellent. And you all have become a true epitome of what it looks like to design this home, a 10-year journey. You are 26 years removed from the circumstances, and you continue to just be a beacon of light. So kudos to you for turning a tragedy into a triumph, literally. And I've seen the photos of people coming from all over, and you host students and other researchers there, and you are helping to make lives better all over the world in ways I'm sure you've never even imagined, and that people can't thank you enough for. Because oftentimes when we walk into a facility, and certainly as you mentioned, a public facility or a private facility like a home, we wouldn't think twice about these items. But they are a real challenge for people on a daily basis.
Well, thank you for your acknowledgement. I'm honored by your words, Eddie.
Well, yes, thank you. And just want to put a underscore on the final component because folks may not go into a home, but more and more, especially as we're going to these meetings in person, we're happy to be at these meetings, but we want to make sure that we're continue meeting planners and people inside of corporations thinking about how we can be more inclusive and of all people who are in need of accessibility assistance when we design for these spaces in our meetings. Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that we share as a closing point for people who've tuned in for our session today?
Well, being more aware is really the key for all of your listeners and viewers today. Having a different mindset, have an inclusion mindset to understand what would it be like if you had a disability? What would it be like as you get older? As we age, we're going to lose some of our vision, we're going to lose some of our hearing, our strength, our mobility, our memory. And so as we think about aging in our own homes, aging in place, or as we want to continue to live in a community, what changes need to be made so that the world is a better place, making life easier?
Excellent, Rosemarie. Thank you for those heartfelt words that we need to take away from this conversation. And I just realized that we had someone who tuned in from LinkedIn, Cheryl Brinkley, who I had the privilege of interviewing about a month or so ago. Cheryl, thank you for tuning in. Cheryl says, thank you for your advocacy and raising awareness, Dr. Rosemarie. Prior to you sharing your story, I was just thinking that we all have a stake in protecting and amplifying accessibility changes because we never know when we ourselves will need to personally use such resources or support a loved one through the process themselves. Eddie Turner, great topic for thoughtful partnership. Thank you, Cheryl. We appreciate that. And I hadn't seen that, and I'm reading it live for the first time, but that literally is what you said in your is an overarching message you want to take away. Am I right?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's just synchronicity. We were both thinking the same thing at the same time.
Yes, yes. How about that? So I almost missed that comment. Thank you for sharing that, Cheryl, from LinkedIn. And as I mentioned, we have people tuned in from LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So this is being seen by a lot of people. And then certainly a lot of people watch our replays as well. I always ask people on the Keep Leading podcast, Dr. Rossetti, what's a quote that you use that helps you to keep leading?
It's an easy one. It's right here on my desk. Be persistently optimistic. That's the simple one. Just be persistently optimistic. And there's going to be a roller coaster of life, things that don't go well. There's going to be things that go extremely well. So we just have to have a hopeful thought, believe in the hopeful future, not on self-pity, and move on.
Believe in a hopeful future, not have self-pity, and move on. And if I am someone who's experienced a tragedy and I may be feeling a little self-pity, can you share something that you used that got you to pull yourself up and march on the way you have?
Well, there's a lot of lessons that I learned while I was coming back from the tragedy. And that was the one in terms of a hopeful future, not self-pity. Fortunately, Christopher Reeve, as you may know, was an actor and a Superman and an advocate. And while he was riding a horse in an equestrian event, he fell off the horse, broke his neck. Christopher Reeve had been speaking in Columbus the year before I was injured. And that was the message from the stage, is to focus on a hopeful future, not on self-pity. And he was using his life and his example. And so I remembered that as I lay in the hospital bed, saying all the things that I can't do anymore and crying over the trauma and just amazing bad influences. What I was thinking about was changing my emotion. And so I was thinking about things that I would never, ever be able to do again. And I was getting sad and crying and depressed. And so I thought, focus on a hopeful future. What are the things I can do? What are the adaptive equipment? What can I learn to do differently? And just move on and stop crying. I looked at the clock and I said, when the clock changes, that's the last time I'm crying today. Stop it.
Mm.
Focus on hope and move on with my therapy and let the therapy help heal my body.
Focus on hope. Be persistently optimistic for a brighter future. Thank you so much, Dr. Rossetti. We appreciate having you on the show, and a big hug to you because, as I said, I talk about you all the time. So I wanted people to actually see you and hear from you directly the way I have had a chance to. Uh, People can find out about you. The banner is showing, rosemariespeaks.com. Anything else you would like to share about where they can locate you? Certainly follow her on social media. If you're not following her on social media, please look for her on LinkedIn and follow her, connect with her.
Sure, you can search me on LinkedIn. You can search me on Facebook. And my two websites is rosemariespeaks.com and the house is at udll.com. So have fun. And there's lots of videos, lots of podcasts, lots of photos, lots of articles, lots of free resources. So learn from me. Take it on.
Thank you very much. Dr. Rosemarie Rossetti, an expert in disability inclusion, accessibility, and universal design, a keynote speaker who you should be booking, a consultant so that you get your event space right, get your workplace right. She works with professionals to achieve, promote inclusive meetings, events, tourism destinations, buildings, and offices. Thank you again for being a guest on Keep Leading Live.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much, Eddie, for inviting me.
My honor. And thank you for listening. That concludes this episode of Keep Leading Live, everyone. I'm Eddie Turner, the Leadership Accelerator, reminding you that leadership is not about your position or your title. Leadership is an activity. Leadership is action. It's not the case of once a leader, always a leader. It's not a garment that we put on and take off. We must be a leader at our core and allow it to emanate in all we do. So whatever you're doing, always keep leading.